There we go. All right, we're rolling. So thank you so much, Paul Crossley, for being with us this morning to talk a little bit about your celebrated piano career over the years. And we are compiling an ornithological guide on our library webpage, a catalog of the birds. And Paul, you have a lot of experience with Messiaen, the French composer Olivier Messiaen. And I was reading a little bit about you that you studied from an early age with Messiaen and Loriot. Would you mind talking about your experience studying with those two?
Well, it was the way of meeting them was very extraordinary. I just finished my 3 years at Oxford doing a degree in English literature. And because it was known that I spoke a little French, wasn't very good, it was only a little in those days. There was a thing called the English Bach Festival, run by a very extraordinary Greek lady called Lina Lalandi, which took place in both London and Oxford. And it had been, as you imagine from the thing, a festival to do with Bach. Mm-hmm. She decided about 3 years earlier than that would be Bach and a modern living composer. And in 1966, it was Olivier Messiaen. So they and lots of French musicians came to Oxford, and I was asked if I would help. And I said I would. In my college, I practiced the piano in my college, but lots of the French musicians were actually asked to stay in the college, and they used the piano. I couldn't play in the thing. So a friend of mine who ran the Oxford Playhouse said, "We've got their marvelous grand piano. Come and practice early in the morning. Nobody will know." So I practiced early in the morning. I'm practicing a Mozart piano concerto. And suddenly from behind the safety curtain, I hear the orchestral accompaniment starting from another piano. I stop, and round the corner comes Olivier Messiaen and his wife, Yvonne Loriot. And they said, "Do you speak French?" And I said, "Yes, a little," because they only ever spoke French. And they said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I've just finished an English degree." And immediately they said, "Well, why don't you come to Paris to study with us?" Just like that.
Wow.
So I said, "Yeah, I'd like that very much." I thought, I couldn't go to Paris to study with them. And as I say, there were concerts going on there. And I talked to an English music critic who knew about things French. And I said, you know, the Messiaens have invited me to come to Paris to study with them. I have no money, I can't go there. So he said, "Oh, I'll tell you exactly what to do. I'll get in touch with the French embassy. There are things called French government scholarships. I'm sure they'll be interested in this. This is their number, ring them." So I rang them. They said, "Well, if you'd asked 3 months earlier, this would have been exactly the kind of thing we were looking for. But try next year because we've awarded them all." That was in the morning. In the evening, I got a message from them that said, "If you can be in Paris in 2 weeks' time, the scholarship's yours."
Wow.
And I went there, started, and years later, when I'm a professional pianist, I met the person who was the French cultural attaché, and I said, "You know, it's like a Hollywood story. How could that have happened?" And she said, "It's more a Hollywood story than you think. We were so interested in it, we made an extra one for you."
Wow, that's remarkable.
Yeah, wow. And there I was, and it started.
It's, the whole story is just remarkable that you were promised that you can practice here and nobody can hear you. Yet one of the most celebrated 20th century composers was just in the other room listening.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have any sense at the time? I mean, I'm sure Messiaen was famous then. Did you have a sense that this is one of the most celebrated composers of our generation, of our century?
Yes, I did, because I went to a boarding school in Yorkshire, a very nice school, not an unfriendly place at all. But we weren't in jail, but we weren't let out, if you see what I mean. And the first concert I ever heard, I was taken to Leeds. This was in Wakefield in Yorkshire. Taken to Leeds Parish Church to hear an organ recital it was the organist of Liverpool Cathedral, and he played a piece called La Nativité du Seigneur by Messiaen. I mean, I think I was 13 at the time, and I thought, this is me. This is me, and immediately bought them. I was the organist at my school. I thought, and so already, and then the moment I'd heard this music, I started to discover more. I mean, it was difficult in those days because there wasn't so much on what were LPs in those days. So it was just chance acquaintance of getting to know it and getting to know it and getting to know it. But yes, I mean, I knew, and I read all about him. So that by the time I went to Paris, which was like 12 years later, I really knew all about him.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And were your lessons specifically piano, limited to piano, or did you do organ? Did you talk about composition?
No, I did. I'm sorry, I did two things. I actually had my lessons. Well, there's another interesting story about it. I actually had my lessons in their apartment. They lived in a tiny apartment in Montmartre, and so I had all my lessons there, which were with Yvon Loriot. But Messiaen would come back after his hours at the Paris Conservatoire, and he would sit in on and particularly when we were not necessarily learning things by him, but I remember particularly learning Preludes of Debussy. He would come and he brought me his scores, and it was very interesting. The preludes, which they have titles, but they have no programs. But in the margins of the thing, Messiaen had written his own program to the whole thing, as he did with his catalogue, the Birds thing. So he would say, I mean, something like La terrasse des audiences au clair de lune, du clair de lune, I beg pardon. He would say, ici, de la froideur de la lune, and that's the darkness of the moon, and all sorts. I mean, it was a story. It was written by each. It was very interesting.
That's remarkable. I was going to ask what sort of music you studied, but it sounds like you studied all kinds of music with Loriot.
Yes, I mean we studied. I mean, Mozart, Schumann, Beethoven. No, not Beethoven actually. No, but there's another story about that later. And obviously pieces by Messiaen. And I mean, it was a great time. I had an absolutely wonderful fellow pupil who was a French in Paris called Jean-Rodolphe Cars. And he was a very interesting guy, from whom I learned almost as much as I learned from Yvon Loriot, because he was much better than I was in those days. He was actually from a Jewish family from Vienna who had got out before Hitler and was in Paris. Believe it or not, he gave up piano. He won the Messiaen piano competition. It was about 6th prize in the Leeds piano competition, and is now a Catholic priest.
Wow. Okay.
And in fact, he gave Messiaen his last rites when Messiaen was dying.
Wow.
And we keep in touch. He's still, if you look on YouTube, you'll see him. He's still around. And if you listen to records of him, he was a wonderful pianist. And I used to sit and watch him. And when we both went into the Messiaen piano competition in 1968, I knew him very well. His parents very well. His parents took both of us to the railway station to go down to Ohio, and they both said to us, well, we don't mind which of you wins, but make sure you're both 1 and 2 prizes. We were. Very nice.
That's wonderful. I'll have to look him up. I'll have to listen to some. See if I can find anything. So.
There's records of Messiaen, records of Liszt, wonderful pianist.
Yeah. I'm so interested. It sounds like you've got a number of side stories that you could potentially go off on here. You mentioned something about Beethoven. Is that possibly a French Germanic thing, issue that Loriot would not teach certain repertoire? Or
no, not at all. The story I was going to tell you is when was it? It was sometime in the 80s in Bonn, which was then the capital of West Germany. They organized a Beethoven Messiaen festival, and part of this festival, when I was playing Des Canyons Étoiles by Messiaen, the city of Bonn decided to give Messiaen the freedom of the city of Bonn. So there was a reception with all the bigwigs of Bonn, the Messiaen, Yvonne Laurier were there. I was asked, would I play 2 piano pieces, one by Beethoven and one by Messiaen, which I did as part of this celebration. And then the presentation was given to Messiaen, and it was done in German and in French. But afterwards, he said in French, he said, of course, it's very difficult for me to respond with gratitude to this honor, which I'm very grateful for. But because I am in Bonn, I will do the thing which is most important. I will now analyze for you the first movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which he did.
Wow.
I thought, I mean, it was a marvelous thank you.
Yeah,
And a wonderful tribute to Beethoven, which, I mean, he knew it backwards.
Right, and he had such a gift, Messiaen had such a gift for structure.
And analysis.
In analysis, yeah, and so it is a wonderful gift. I was kind of guessing at what Messiaen might say, and I must say I did not see that coming, but that's remarkable.
Yeah.
So we're getting back to Messiaen. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask specifically about Catalogue des Oiseaux, since we're working through our library on this field guide for birds. Did you study Catalogue des Oiseaux with Messiaen and Loriot? Or
I studied 3 of the pieces, which I played. My favorite is, and I've recorded this, is La Bouscarle, Setti's Warbler, which is a marvelous piece. And again, I always seem to have stories about Messiaen. When Jean-Rodolphe Carse and I won this piano competition, which took place in a place called Royan, which is at the end of the Gironde estuary in France. It's a marvelous place. It was a wonderful May or June day. It was only the second piano competition. The first piano thing had been won by a French pianist called Michel Béroff. And when the finals took place in the morning, and then we were all to go off to a chateau to have lunch and to hear a recital by Michel Béroff. As we had won this competition, Messiaen and Yvonne Loriot decided to take Jean-Rodolphe and I in their car. So I suppose we left the hall where the finals were taking place about, I don't know, 11:45, 11:45 midday or something. Beautiful day, all the windows were open. Every 5 minutes, we stopped. Yvonne Loriot was driving. Messiaen said, stop the car. And he would say, listen to that. That is. But he'd done it so many times that we'd missed the lunch by the time we got there. He claimed he could actually identify, just by ear, 50 French birds.
Wow. Which
is a lot. And he said even others, if he thought about it, he could do. I mean, he'd been taken by an ornithologist when he was young, by a real ornithologist. And I've been told about this. So, but I can you recognize 50 birds just by something?
I don't know if I can know one. I mean,
no, I know in my back garden when the nightingale sings, and I can do a blackbird and a thrush, but I'm not sure I can do much more than that. But he really, that's that the ornithologist trained him. And he was able, he went around, and of course, if you think about when he was doing it, there weren't any portable tape recorders. He couldn't have done it even if he wanted to. I mean, he went around with a manuscript paper, typed to a board, a pencil, and actually notated them from the ear. I mean, it's an extraordinary ear.
I'm sure he must have. Yeah. I see. I've read about avid birding trips that he would go on just for seeing birds. Were you ever a part of any of those expeditions, or did he ever speak about those trips?
Yes, he did, but because he told me about the one before the Des Canyons Étoiles, when he went to Utah, and saw places like Bryce Canyon and all the wonderful Zion Park and so on. So he actually went there and did it. And in fact, I went myself. I wanted to know what this, because he'd been so enthusiastic about it. I wanted to go to Utah and see what it was like, because I mean, it's absolutely glorious. I mean, I remember being in Bryce Park, and I remember when we went, there was nobody around, just us. It's as if he were in another planet almost. So yes, he did, and it was important for him, because when he transcribed his bird songs and used them in a piece, whether it's a catalogue d'oiseaux or des canons étoiles, he also was describing in his imagination the landscape in which they're found. So, you know, a bird which sings in Bryce Canyon doesn't sing, it sings in Bryce Canyon.
Right.
So that its song, as put down by Messiaen, is coloured, is surrounded by the landscape in which that particular bird sings. It's a wonderful feat of the imagination, I think.
Yeah, and I even that work Au Canyon nos Étoiles is a big point of pride for America, just because of the landscape component. Yeah. And so it's performed periodically over here, and it always makes me feel proud just to see it being programmed and performed. Let's do, some of our listeners might be kind of interested to hear you speak a little bit about Messiaen and maybe his faith life, if you could. So we're a Catholic Benedictine college here at the College of St. Scholastica, and Messiaen was famously an ardent Catholic. I was even listening to some of your commentary on Symphonia, which we'll get to in a question or two, about where you went into some detail about how Messiaen regarded his faith in combination with his art. Did glimpses of his faith ever come out in your meetings with him or lessons with Glorio, or do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Well, one of the most extraordinary, it's not necessarily an instance of his faith, which was very, very profound indeed, is, as you probably know, he was for many years, ever since the since the 1930s, the organist at the Trinité Church in Paris. And when I went to study with him, which was in the late 60s, the organ had been taken out to be redone, to be out of the church for 5 years. It was restored during the time I was there, and as the inauguration of the new organ, Messiaen improvised for 2 hours in his own style. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing. This is what French organists do. But the idea that a composer in the mid-20th century was such an executant. I mean, it's like Mozart playing the piano or improvise, or Liszt playing the piano, that you could improvise in your own style for 2 hours. That's very extraordinary. I don't know whether that's an aspect of his faith. He was, I mean, he was a practicing Catholic, always a practicing Catholic. I just remembered another story, which when the final of the Messiaen piano competition, which I was telling you about, which took place in Bayonne, and it was just before lunch. Come 10 o'clock in the morning, the jury is assembled. No Messiaen, no Yvon Laurie. What's happened to them? Have they had an accident or something? And about a quarter of an hour later, they both walk into the hall and, where have you been? Where have you been? They said, oh, we've been to Mass. Much more important that we pray for the candidates than listen to them. He actually said that.
I'm sure in his mind, it's just on a different level of priority than the competition would have been.
Yeah. I mean, it's his faith was like breathing. It was just, you know, I mean, he said he's all, you know, that he could not remember a time when he didn't believe in God, and he loved all the trappings of the Catholic faith. I mean, and he started. His first compositions were organ compositions, and they're all on religious topics. I remember when we have a thing called Desert Island Discs in Britain, where you choose, and one of mine, they said, are you going to choose anything by Messiaen? I said, yes, but not what you would expect. I said, I'm going to choose almost the first piece he ever wrote, which is called Le Banquet Céleste, the Celestial Banquet for organ. It's marvelous. His entire style is there, and somehow it was the poetry of Catholicism in some way that worked for him. It wasn't a rigid belief at all. Quite the contrary. It was a very all-embracing, not strict at all in any kind of way. But the poetry of his religious fervor is what comes through in the music.
I agree. Yes, and it does seem well paired with Catholicism, which has a long and, as you described, poetic tradition and a lot of mystery too, right? And I feel like Messiaen's musical language is particularly well given to this mystery, all the mysteries of the faith. Did you by chance? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, he, of course, as you know, he had many pupils from all over the world. So he would have many people from Japan and Asia who are obviously not a Catholic, not Christian even, but this was not supposed to be a barrier in any kind of way. I mean, this was, his Catholicism was universal enough to embrace everything.
Such an inspiration, I think, at a time when many composers were going more into a secular direction. Messiaen was just steadfast in his faith, and sticks out to me in that way. Yeah. Great. I mentioned before your work with Sinfonietta. I had the privilege to view some of the footage on YouTube. So Sinfonietta was a TV program that you did back late 80s, early 90s, correct?
Yeah, mid-80s, yes.
Mid-80s. Yep, so this was involving the London Sinfonietta, and was sort of a music appreciation, music education documentary style piece for new music, for more avant-garde music at the time. Did you, as a young man, always envision yourself on TV, or did it take some adjustment to appear in front of the camera?
No, I mean, I never thought about it. The way the thing came about is that I was at a concert in London. I was playing Messiaens Exotique, and the then director of the London Sinfonietta, Michael Weiner, said, do you mind talking to the audience for 2 or 3 minutes beforehand? So I said, no, I said some things about it. And there was a TV producer in the audience who said, that actually illuminated the piece for me. Will you make a series?
Wow.
But never, no, I had never, I loved doing it. I had no problems in front of the, I think I'm actor manqué, really. It's very funny. Before going on the concert platform, I never allow anybody to see me beforehand, and so I can control my nerves and so on. But I never had any problem in front of the camera at all. Should have been an actor.
You do seem very natural in front of the camera, and I would say what I got from it, the feeling that comes through most clearly is just your joy for this music, and in sharing this music, which many people regard as very challenging. It can be challenging to listen to, but in my viewing of it, it was not that you were lecturing, or it was not that you were trying to cajole people into liking this music. It was just born from a very clear love of the music.
Well, I wanted, I apart from getting to the nitty-gritty of the music, I wanted all the time to say how this relates to our lives. It's about life, and it's about, and of course, when a composer writes a piece of music, I may play it, you may hear it. We have no idea whether the experience we're enjoying is the same thing. There's a wonderful poem by an English poet called Gerard Manley Hopkins, who was a Catholic priest, in fact, and it's about Henry Purcell, and he describes in a wonderful sentence what music is. He calls the composition the forged feature. And he says, what does the forged feature do? And he says, it finds me. It is the rehearsal of own. Isn't that a wonderful? And it's about you. The rehearsal of own. And the next line is of abrupt self there, something you don't expect, something you don't know, but it's there. But the idea of a piece, I mean, in other words, for the composer, it's the rehearsal of own. Mm-hmm. For me playing it, it's the rehearsal of own. For the listener, it's the rehearsal of own. But own is you.
That is, it's a great
description of music.
Yes. I mean, we in art music and classical music, we so often think about or present works as if they're in a museum exhibit, like behind glass or whatever, but these are really living, breathing works. It's a performance art that becomes reinvigorated every time we present it. And so it's a beautiful reminder.
I mean, it's always recreated. We don't even hear it like it was. I was about 20 years ago between houses. And we rented a flat for a while. The reason we did is that it had a grand piano. It was an old 19th century Bechstein piano, but it had 19th century pitch, which was half a semitone lower than modern pitch, which was exactly the pitch that Beethoven had. You have no idea what the Waldstein Sonata, which is in C major, sounds like when it's in B major.
Right, exactly. And certain passages might be hard. You know, those octave glissandos might be harder in B major than in C major.
yeah, exactly. But the sound it was very extraordinary. Anyway.
Right. Yes, I know that gives singers a lot of problems when the sopranos high notes, you know, now they have to sing one semitone higher than would have been expected for things like Queen of the Night and those super high pieces back from Mozart and Beethoven's day. Yeah. Great. So with Sinfonietta, I want to ask just if there were any particularly memorable episodes that you aired or things that were very special to you that stick out in your memory as, memorable.
Of the series?
Yeah, from the
television films. Let me think. I loved making the Varese film. We went to where he was brought up on the River Saône, and went to this marvelous place called Tournus, which has this marvelous Romanesque church and abbey, and it really meant something. You had some. This is where this music comes from. Everybody always thought, oh, this is violent modern music and all to do with New York, because that's where he lived. But when you went there, you realize, no, it isn't anything to do with that at all. And he said it, but he wasn't big convinced. So there was that sort of thing. Then we went to, how can I think? We found, I mean, I worked with about 5 or 6 different directors, and I mean, we had a lot of consultation beforehand, because the whole point about the films is it's not just the performance and the words. What you're going to see is actually going to tell you all about the music. So you know, for Messiaen, we found this brand new. It had just been built, not occupied, office block in the city of London, where everything could be on different levels and so on. I mean, so they did a lot of research. I mean, it was, you know, So I would even learn things about the music that I hadn't thought about because I could share these things with the director.
Yeah, and directing, I mean, that's an art form in and of itself. And so this cross-pollination of art forms is very stimulating, no matter what your field is. Yeah.
I'm hoping before the end, shall we say, and with one of the directors that I worked with called Barry Gavin, we're working on a new film to do with the Catalan composer, Frederic Montbeau.
Oh.
So I'm hoping that will happen. I mean, in fact, I'm trying to write the script at the moment.
Really? So this is a current project of yours?
This is a current project. And I can still play the music. I've retired from the concert platform because you can't see them now, but I have what are called Heberden's nodes on my fingers. It's a kind of osteoarthritis. It's from 50 years of piano playing.
Oh.
My surgeon, who was very musical, he said, well, that's what Tippett Messiaen does for you. But you wouldn't have changed it, would you? And I said, no.
A life well lived, you know.
A life well lived, you know. I mean, it's like dancers' feet which wear out. You know,
yes.
Why not?
Yes. I see. That's exciting. We'll have to keep an eye out for this.
Yes, well, it hasn't been made yet, but
yeah. I hope that
we're trying hard.
I suppose that the pandemic slowed things down with the.
Yeah, yes. I mean, everything went into nothing's kind of happened.
Yeah.
That must be very hard for young artists now. Imagine starting out on your career.
Exactly. You know, just the disappearing of engagements for a season was is very concerning, just because you hope that you can preserve those engagements for future seasons, but a lot remains very unknown still.
Something good has come out of it, which a lot of artists have found, which is one of the problems of giving concerts in a hall is not everybody sitting together, because you can separate them. This was not the problem. The problem was the interval and everybody having to go to the toilet, one toilet or two toilets. This is where you couldn't do the separate. So what people have been doing, and I recommended it to an arts organization in Portugal, which I played, is just have a concert which lasts for an hour and do it twice. Do a matinee and do an evening thing. So you can have the same, you can have 100 people in the morning, 100 people in the evening. You know, yeah. Go to the toilet before you've come. But the pianist, all the musicians I know, soloists, musicians, whether they're pianists, violins, love it, as I would love it, because one of the worst things in the concert for music is the interval, because there you are, you're really hot into the middle of it, you're absolutely loving it, and you have to stop for a quarter of an hour or 20 minutes or whatever, which is why everybody goes off and has a drink. So I think this may, certainly as far as solo recitals, this may continue.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, yes, what we can learn from it and what we'll carry through on the concert stage post-pandemic. Great. There's one last question I want to ask you, and this is all from personal curiosity, which is you had a lot of works that you commissioned or works that were dedicated to you that you premiered in your life. And the listing of composers who did this for you, with you, is like a list of the who's who of 20th and 21st century composers. Are there any of those works that are either particularly special to you or that you want young musicians to know about, to hear about, and to study?
Well, I would love them to play the third and fourth piano sonatas of Michael Tippett, which is asking a lot, because boy, are they difficult. And I have a regret that I didn't get the piece I would have liked was from Toru Takemitsu, who was going to write me. I was making a record of all his piano music, and he was going to write me a special piece for it, and he died. But there's a marvelous piece which is dedicated to me and Peter Serkin for two pianos and orchestra. I mean, that I would like people to play more. It's rather difficult because, you know, getting two soloists and a large orchestra.
Yes.
Yeah. But I have played it in the States. So I played it in Kansas. I remember doing it in Kansas City.
In Kansas City.
Yeah.
Not far from where I studied. I studied in Lawrence, Kansas, so just about 45 minutes away from Kansas City.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, this was, I think it was in 2000. There was a huge ice storm, I can remember, and all the trees were dripping in icicles. I, one of the pieces which is not dedicated to me, but in a sense was written for, is Hans Werner Henze's Requiem, which is for piano soloist, trumpet soloist, and small orchestra. And that's a very special piece for me. But fortunately, that gets played quite a lot now. What else is there? I don't know. There's a wonderful piece by Olivier Messiaen, who I'm sorry to say died just recently. It was called, it's called Ophelia's Last Dance, which I think that will be taken up a lot because it's a marvelous piece.
Great. I'll have to look into each and every one of those. That's so.
All right.
I take your recommendation very seriously. We'll say that. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for speaking with me this morning, or for you this afternoon. It was a really a very memorable experience for me. I'm sure I'm going to remember for many years, and will be of great interest, I think, to our college community too. So thank you once again, Paul, for speaking to us. And we've got a few of your recordings here through our library subscription, so we'll try to push for people to listen to those as well.
Okay. Well, it was a great pleasure, and I enjoyed it very much.
But I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice day.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.